Welcome, Regenerative Renegades, to our Regenerative Renegade podcast. We have a great guest with us today, Thomas Schroeder from Audubon Conservation Ranching. He is the Senior Partnerships Manager. We'll get into talking about what that is, but Thomas and I work closely together on the Conservation Ranching certification for Thousand Hills. Great guy to work with, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Really great. Couldn't find a more kind, hardworking guy. So thanks for coming in, and you're in person. So many of these we do virtual, and
fantastic.
You're in person.
Yep.
I love it. Little background: Thomas Schroeder, Senior Partnerships Manager, Audubon Conservation Ranching, based in Abilene, Texas, a world away from Clearwater, Minnesota.
A little bit different.
He was just talking about how it's 100 degrees there, and he was glad to come north. He began his Audubon tenure in 2018 as the Audubon Conservation Ranching Program Manager for Texas. As Partnerships Manager for Audubon Conservation Ranching, Thomas works with national and state staff, ranchers, market partners, and other agencies and organizations to implement a wide range of programs and practices across the entirety of the Audubon Conservation Ranching Program. We'll get into what all those words means.
Right?
Yeah. Right. Born and raised in Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
So
you
know the northern Midwest.
I do indeed.
Thomas has worked, I did not know this, Thomas has worked as a head chef for Whole Foods Market and as a farm manager for Green Gate Farms in Austin, Texas. Before working at Audubon, Thomas was a sustainable agriculture specialist at the National Center for Appropriate Technology in Central Texas. Well, we'll have to learn about...
It's another mouthful.
Yeah, that really is true. And a little bit about Audubon Conservation Ranching. You've heard that a few times already. Well, Thousand Hills, turns out, I guess, is the first national brand to achieve that certification. But that we're going to shorten that to ACR, Audubon Conservation Ranching.
There we go.
ACR aims to stabilize declining grassland bird populations in partnership with farmers and ranchers using cattle. I just want everyone to know that. Thousand Hills independent ranches were rigorously audited by Audubon, ultimately meeting the requirements centering on habitat management, environmental sustainability, and animal welfare to earn the Audubon bird-friendly land certification. So that's near and dear to my heart, this changing the trajectory of grassland birds or pollinators, or whatever is in peril due to our agricultural practices. It's something very near and dear to my heart. I want to say right off the top that my mother was a self-educated birder starting at the age of 12 or 11, and she got her first packet of Audubon trading cards.
Okay.
And yet to this day, when you look in her backyard, you see all kinds of bird-friendly baths, cover, trees, feeders, and her binoculars handy. So it runs deep that we care about them. But I think the reason why is that everyone kind of knows when you're around birds or when you're sensitive to seeing them or tracking them that they are kind of a early indicator.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So that, and when you know that, you kind of feel like you have your finger on the pulse a little bit. So, well, to get started, I'd like you to take us through your journey.
Yeah.
On how you ended up here today.
Oh, boy.
And
it's only an hour-long podcast, right?
That's right.
Okay, good. I'll go with the Cliffs version. It was an interesting path. I grew up just outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Had an uncle who owned a family bar and grill. And so I worked there starting about 12 years old as a dishwasher and would work the Friday night fish fry every Friday, and then Saturday morning come back and clean the bar. So that was my introduction to food service and kitchens and those kind of things.
Because every bar and grill in Wisconsin has a Friday night fish fry.
Right? Yep. Yep.
And just for those that don't live in Wisconsin, it is a prerequisite.
It is. It is. You have to, especially in, around the Easter time, that's when it really ramps up. Every Friday night, walleye, perch, you name it. So, so grew up doing that, and then kind of worked my way around, went to college, went to Marquette University in Milwaukee, got an anthropology and philosophy degree from Marquette.
Deep thinker.
Yeah. I really, really enjoyed that there, but there was no philosophy factory in town anymore. So it wasn't anything that you could put to, great use other than it was good for conversations and social hours at the bar and things like that. So stuck with the restaurant business. And then a few years later decided that I needed an adventure and got in my truck and just started heading south. Had some friends in Indianapolis, had a friend in Knoxville, Tennessee, and then just kept driving and hit a bunch of cities and tried to figure out what I liked. And I rolled into Austin, and I can remember pulling down 6th Street in Austin and looking around and going, I think this is cool. I think this is the place for me. Yeah.
Wow.
So
wait, I want to back up to the Uncle's Bar and Restaurant.
Sure.
What are all the positions that you held at that place?
Oh, I mean, so as I was the dishwasher, but then you're also the prep cook.
Yeah.
You have to, you stock the bar. So you're running up and down the stairs. You're cleaning everything, the whole building, top to bottom. My aunt, his wife, we would come in on Saturday mornings. So I would work the Friday night shift and then back on Saturday morning to clean the whole place and get it ready to open. And
that's where you learned your work ethic. Then.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't stick around long enough to be a bartender. Never got to that side of things, and I would help out cooking occasionally here and there. But
that
it was
probably added years to your life that you didn't stick around to become.
I
bartended.
Right.
I was a line cook. I did all that. I love it. Just bringing back memories. The hustle and bustle. And until you worked in it, you don't really understand.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I loved kitchens. After I graduated from Marquette, I worked at a couple other restaurants in Milwaukee. It was the front of the house manager, the back of the house. I loved running expo and the camaraderie of the team and that rush of the, the full house, and you got to get things going and the tickets are pouring in, and
you have to be an adrenaline junkie to survive.
Yeah, exactly. So that was my whole life up until then, and then moved to Austin.
What age were you at this time when you moved on?
This was about 20. I was about 24, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, right around there. And then just tried to find something to do. And when I left Milwaukee, it was kind of a high pressure restaurant, and it was 80 hours, 60 hours a week, and really intense. So when I got to Austin, I was like, well, could do that again, or I could find something that's a little bit, slower pace, let me enjoy the city, and take advantage of everything Austin has to offer. And so that's how I found Whole Foods, and started working just as a regular cook in the kitchen in their prepared foods department. And so it was great. Met my soon-to-be wife about 2 weeks after.
So this was Whole Foods
in Austin. So
a store? Or,
the actual. Yeah,
aren't they headquartered on?
Right.
Austin?
Right.
Yeah.
So this opened up downtown Austin. I was in the North Austin store. So one of the 4th or 5th stores, I think, somewhere in there. Don't quote me on that, but second one in Austin for sure. So it was great. It was, you ran back then. In Whole Foods, you could run your department like your own business. So as long as you made labor and you made food costs, you kind of were given a lot of liberties to be creative and try different things, and had a really great head chef who later became the associate team leader and then the team leader. Really enabled us and empowered us to be creative and work together and explore food. And that's where I fell in love with food, was cooking there and learning about the ingredients. And, it's such a diverse kitchen. You're cooking everything from, fried chicken to these, elaborate tofu and vegan dishes and other things. And so you got to learn everything, you got to see how to do everything from scratch.
So you got your culinary degree and your business degree there.
Yeah, really, without, formally calling it that. So so that was just a lot of fun. And that's actually, further on down the road, that was my spark for going from cooking food to going to growing food. And so that's how I got hooked on farming and organic farming. And we got to meet some of the local vendors that were around. There was a great couple of certified organic vegetable farms that would let you come out, and they were happy to have you come out for half a day and pull weeds or do something like that. And
so you did have that connection farm to table, right?
Yeah. So we started to build on that, and then I moved to North Carolina so that was another great part of Whole Foods, is if you found another store that had an opening, you could just transfer over.
Mm-hmm.
You could move to a new city with a job and with benefits and those kind of things. So my soon-to-be wife at that time, we moved to North Carolina, and she was in the floral side of things, and I was on the kitchen side of things. And so we did that for a year. And
so you met at Whole Foods.
We did.
Interrupted you before you met at Whole Foods.
Met at Whole Foods
right away.
Right away. 2 weeks.
Wow.
2 weeks after I started. Yeah.
So that pull when you got in the pickup truck and started driving was to find her.
Something. That's right. That's right. Yeah, indeed. That's so cool. That was, Whole Foods definitely opened up a lot of doors for me and kind of helped me see what was out there besides the kitchen and beyond, and how things got to the kitchen. And then at the same time, as I was meeting her father lived in Abilene. He had a ranch that he was running there. And so I started to come out and help him, for the first 10 years, I was just standing and trying to stay out of the way and learn as much as I could and not help or anything. But started to get more exposed to the livestock production side of things. And so right after we got married, we had a house and we had our first child. And I decided what everybody does after they have their first kid was I was going to quit my job and go back to school. So after when he was about 6 months old, I did that. I left Whole Foods and I went to Texas State University and went for an agriculture degree.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Wow. So what? How old are you at this time now?
I was just about 30.
Right around 30.
Around there. Okay. Yeah, right in there. Did
Good
that.
For you.
Yeah, and because I already had the prerequisites for my first undergrad degree, I didn't have to take any of the the classes across the campus. I took every agriculture class they offered. From, from livestock production to feeds and feeding to welding to carpentry, like all of everything that they offered through the ag department. And
so they have a degree where they actually teach welding.
Welding was a part of the curriculum. There was structures. So we built, it was a project where you designed and built something. And it happened to be that the instructors, I think it was our secondary instructor or something like that, needed a new deer blind. So we ended up building him his deer blind, but we had to follow all the specs and all the rules. We had a mechanics class. So we took apart a Briggs & Stratton lawnmower engine and pulled out all the parts and then had to put it all back together. And if it didn't start, you didn't pass. So
so how did that feel? You were 30, and I would imagine there's a bunch of 18-year-olds.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So were you kind of like big uncle, or
after once it was a small enough department that you had the same classes with the same kids over and over again. So I think there was some of that, I had that perspective of coming back as my second time going to college, and it was a little less nightlife and a little more focused on the education side of things. So definitely was kind of that.
That's so cool.
Older person.
I didn't even know something like that existed.
Yeah.
In a university that they would teach all those things.
Still there today. Yeah. The soils class.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this is Texas
State University in San Marcos.
Okay.
So, yeah. And they're still going. It's one of the largest growing ag programs that's going on in Texas right now. They're actually one of their lead professors, who's become one of my dear friends, Dr. Ken Mix, he's focused on the regenerative side of things. Okay. So he teaches soil health, and he teaches all of the, the principles of soil health and all the things that come with it. And I remember my soils class, no detriment to him when I took it, but we learned that, soil's there to hold plants in place, and it's there as a medium, and it's sand, silt, and clay, and these are the macronutrients and these are the micronutrients, and that's what soil is. There was no talk of soil health or soil life. For
isn't that funny? That's so recent,
and it was only 15 years ago or so.
Wow.
So since then, now that's those are some of the principles they're teaching, and he actually bought a farm not too long ago, and so he's out rotating his cows, and they've got their chickens, and they're trying to show these practices on the land and everything like that. So yeah, it was a really great learning experience. But yeah, we had our second son while I was there. So I'm, going to the greenhouse with Jack on the baby Bjorn and checking on my tomato plants, and I helped them start the student garden and, did all that kind of stuff. And so
Wow.
just
So how did you, this may be too personal, but how did you make it financially work to be able to stop and go do that
my
after?
my wife is amazing.
Okay. All right.
She carried the load, definitely for a while there. And we had some help from family,
Yeah.
kind of, traded off, summers come help
Because
with
that's
the
a hard thing to
ranch.
do at 30, like
It was.
unplug
Yeah.
financially,
Yeah. No,
like,
absolutely. We were in a pretty fortunate spot to be
yeah,
able to
good.
balance that out. She was, by the time when she started at Whole Foods, she was in the floral department. And by that time that I went back to school, she was the floral buyer for the
Okay.
Southwest region. So she
Oh,
was at the
okay.
corporate office
Yeah.
buying flowers for all the stores in Texas and Oklahoma and Louisiana.
Yeah.
So she was pretty amazing and kept us going through that. And then even after, you walk out with an ag degree, and my first job, you mentioned Greengate Farms. I worked for another farmer. His name is Pedro Chambon, and his farm is called My Father's Farm.
Okay.
But just you're working for minimum wage at a or certified organic vegetable farm.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the things that I learned, and I got to drive the delivery truck for Pedro, and he was selling his vegetables to HEB, which is the big grocery store chain in Texas. And so I would once a week I would drive the delivery truck and park with all of the giant semi trucks and unload our vegetables, and got to figure out that whole process and see the warehouse side of things. And
so here comes your supply chain degree.
Exactly. Learn about all of that, from soup to nuts, and see how that goes. And and then was fortunate enough to go and start working for NCAT. So that's that National Center for Appropriate Technology.
Okay. What is that?
So that's a program that's their
appropriate technology.
It's it's an extension service for certified organic, or not even certified, but an extension service for sustainable and organic producers.
Okay.
So they kind of, they saw the void of, if I live in a place and I want to grow organically, and I go to my county extension office and they don't have anybody that's trained in those practices, they're going to point you towards a jug or some kind of a side
for sure
to take care of your problem.
I also didn't know that existed.
Yeah. So and a lot of it is, it started off, it was kind of the transition when I got there, but everything was on paper. He would write, different documents about tomato production or sheep and goat production, small ruminants, how to get to a market, how to market everything for small producers. And they were all paper copies, and people used to go on and order them, and they would mail you the paper copies in the mail. And so by the time I was there, everything was digital, but we did a help desk, like people could call in and just ask you questions, or, you would go out and visit farms or work with different programs.
No, it says they're national. So does that mean they're represented in every state?
Yeah. So there's different regions, different regional offices. And so we had folks in the Northeast. California has a really great program, does a lot of great things with the Latino farmers community there. They have a conference every year that they do. In Texas, we had a really great team. We had a poultry specialist, and we had an agronomist, soil health specialist, and we had a retired, he used to work for TDA, Texas Department of Agriculture. And so he retired from that and came to work for us. So he knew everybody in the state associated with agriculture and how to grease the wheels and understand supply chains and different pieces and different moving parts. And we did a lot of work with local food movements and trying to connect small producers and aggregate small producers together. And how can we, if I got 10 vegetable farmers, how can I get you guys to all work together to sell into the local school district, or
all the challenges that, there's so many challenges when you're unconventional,
right?
Like simple support on how to control this pest or how to manage a goat.
Exactly.
Like you say, aggregating.
Simple, the eye test for sheep and goats, to help for health and those kind of things.
Yeah.
And so.
Wow, I didn't know that kind of support was there.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's still there today. There's still lots of folks that are doing great work through NCAT. Their main office is in Butte, Montana. So that got to be my first trip to Montana, was to go to the home office and get trained up there and do that for a while.
So what kind of regions do they have? How do they break the country up?
They do the upper Great Plains is where the Montana office services, and then Texas has a pretty good presence. They've got folks in Arkansas, has a really great team, in Mississippi. And then the California team, and I think there's still some folks over in the Northeast.
Okay. So not a lot.
Not a lot. No, spread out.
Not in the upper Midwest.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, not too many in the upper Midwest. But the information that they share is pretty ubiquitous.
Yeah, sure.
In terms
that makes sense.
Yeah, in terms of how you can manage for pests and those kind of things.
Yeah.
So
that is great. New resource for all you
small
or unconventional producers.
It's a great place they share a lot of information about events.
NCAT.org. So it's NC as in cow, A for appropriate, T for technology.
Correct.
.org. NCAT. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
For all you producers out there that need some support.
Yeah,
beyond
lots
the
of great
conventional.
resources for small direct to market, or going to the farmer's market, or, with all the new FSMA rules and all of the different the food handling rules that are in place, right?
Yep.
Like, they get really confusing really quick. And
Yep.
what's my scale and how do I fit into this? What do I have to do?
Yep.
They're really great at helping to explain that, or connecting folks to resources that can do that.
So, all right. So you were there.
So I was there, and then the Audubon opportunity came available about, I guess that would be about 6 years ago or so, to be the program manager for Texas and Oklahoma. And so started working right then and there. Just got off the press and started running, and we certified our first ranch in Texas about 6 months after I started. So that's Burgundy beef, and he's his ranch is southwest of Dallas-Fort Worth area, but they have 2 brick and mortar locations, one in Fort Worth and one in Dallas, and they do direct shipping. But that was the start of which I was one of my favorite parts. And there's a big part of me that wishes I could still do this, but for about 4 years, all I did was drive around Texas and meet some of the best regenerative ranchers in the state, guys that didn't, they've been doing it for 20 years and didn't call it regenerative, and
just
didn't look at it that way, but just like had that value and had that idea of, the moving of animals and the long periods of rest and recovery and working with nature. A lot of those concepts were just starting to become like more talked about and more vocalized, but these guys were just doing it because it was profitable. It was the right thing for them to do. They saw the market that was available for it, and we're just doing some amazing things.
Well, and that's consistent with what I've seen. These early adopters that were in the regenerative space that I've met and talked to, and clearly you've met and talked to more of them than I have. But what I find fascinating is that, yeah, they have the values of a steward. They want to take care of their land, but it just made sense to them because there was a return for the effort. They did see the improvement in however they wanted to measure it in financial terms, but then they also I think in a lot of cases the fringe benefit or the even unintended consequence was that, oh my gosh, I'm also improving the soil, I'm improving the water cycle, I'm improving the habitat, wildlife habitat, and birds and pollinator, so it's like, that's what's so beautiful about this, because so many times when you talk about, let's just call it green initiatives, they don't
really
make sense. They don't make financial sense sometimes.
Sure.
Like I would say one that comes to mind is burning corn in our automobiles. We're depleting soil. There's a lot of processing that has to happen to that corn to turn it into ethanol. And then we got to put it, we put it in our gas tank, and it's just kind of a spiraling down approach. It might be a Band-Aid right now, but long-term, it may not work. And so and I just find that with a lot of green approaches, it's like there isn't this long-term perpetual improvement that's happening as a result of it. That there's all these things that we shouldn't talk about. We shouldn't bring up this non-green component of whatever it is.
Yeah.
Solar or ethanol or whatever. Let's not talk about that. Let's just talk about how it's a solution. That we say it's a solution. And in regenerative agriculture, I'm skeptical of anything that says that it's going to be green or sustainable or whatever. But I know I've been able to witness with my own eyes that it actually can help that farmer survive, and it can help our food system. And there's a lot of other help. So to me, it's so rewarding to talk to people like you mentioned, like that.
Yeah.
Where they've been at it for a while, toiling away. No one's paying any attention. They're just doing it on their land. They're not doing it for recognition. They're not doing it for any other reason than I'm trying to figure out the best model for my land and for the future.
Yep.
Both. Right now, I need to survive, but I also want everything to be better in the future too. And that had to be some fascinating stories and characters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We worked some great folks. There's a rancher. He works for the Dixon Water Foundation, and so they're a foundation that their goal is to improve watersheds and water health. And so they have a ranch that part of it is conventional, set stock, and part of it, and the large part of it, is rotationally grazed, with just the idea to like, let's show that these practices work. Let's show that grazing alone can improve, biodiversity and bird habitat and soil carbon and water retention and water quality and those things. And so Casey Wade, who's now the executive director, he was the ranch manager when I started, taught me a lot about how they were grazing their animals, and how he just, the reading of the land and watching and knowing when to move animals. Cause that was always one of my, my big questions was, like I would show up at these ranches, and part of the Audubon certification is we have a habitat management plan. And I felt like I was like, you tell me what to put in this, your habitat management plan. You're doing so amazing. And so I just got to, how do you move the animals? How are you reading the landscape? How do you know, it used to drive me crazy that I'm sure you've gotten the question, like, how do you know when to move? Well, it depends.
Yeah, it totally.
It used to drive me. It depends. Used to drive me crazy, but it makes sense. It does, and and there's a lot more behind that answer of it depends. But it's how did these guys get to that point, and what are they looking for in terms of animal health? And Casey could see reading a lot of you read the poop, you read the animal function, and you read how they interact with you, and instinctively, okay, it's time to move. Like we're ready to keep moving, and and do those things. So and I got to see that in Texas is so diverse in terms of climates, right? So I was out in far west Texas, where they measure rainfall in hours per year. How many hours did it rain last year?
And what's a typical number?
8,
12.
12.
Wow.
Like, so, they're not measuring in inches.
Last week.
They're not measuring in inches or, acre feet or something like that. It's out, just hours of rain per year. So you got that environment. And then I work with some really great folks over on the Gulf Coast, where they're getting 70 to 80 inches of rain per year, dealing with a whole bunch of different causes and results because of that rain, right? And all the different things you have to do. So just learning and seeing how these practices can be applied anywhere, and you can do it on, these different types of environments. And, the old, like, well, you can move your cattle like that because you get all the rain, or you can move your cattle like that because you don't get enough rain.
Right.
Like, just like,
well, that works for you, but never worked for me.
Right.
Yeah.
and that's,
and some of that's true.
It is.
Sometimes you're right. That probably won't work for you.
Right.
But if you're my neighbor right here, it might work for you,
because it works for me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so that's one thing that I learned too, is I've been with Audubon, and I've, in my role as the partnerships manager, I've gotten to kind of expand that. And I've written habitat management plans for producers in Oklahoma and Kansas and Arkansas. We wrote one for a producer in Virginia who was originally part of a supply chain that we were trying to connect the dots for. And so to be able to go to those places and just kind of come with that base of like, okay, I understand rest and recovery and rotation, and how does it fit in this setting, and how can you change it and do it differently? And I've helped with management plans in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So it's, the principles can be applied anywhere. It's the last one. I always thought it was great, when Gabe Brown and the ideas of the 5 principles of soil health were coming out, and they added the last one, which was know your context. And I was like, that was like a light went off for me when they did that. It was like, that's it. You have to be able to have that local or, regional expertise and adaptability.
And what are you trying to accomplish?
Right. Right. And that was always my, when I would sit down with anyone, it was, what are your goals? Let's start. I'm coming to you to work on your habitat management plan, but we're going to start with the goals of your operation in terms of what do you want your daily, weekly, monthly life to look like? What do you want, your profitability to look like? What do you want your, the longevity of the property to look like?
Right.
So those are all the things that we start with habitat management plans, the goals of the rancher.
And they're not always the same.
No,
because sometimes,
very different.
from way back on thinking about that, you'd be like, well, they're all going to answer that about the same. Not really.
No,
not really.
No. Yeah. I want do you want your family to be involved?
Right.
Do you not want your family to be involved?
What kind of family feud do you have?
Yeah. How many kids are we trying to designate different parts of the ranch for?
Right.
Or do things like that. So
yeah.
It all, it's just that knowing your context and kind of applying these practices can be done anywhere, and you can make a difference, and you can make progress and make change.
So I'm going to ask you a philosophical question, since you have a philosophical education.
Okay.
So the common thread that I'm hearing from you is this openness to learn things, openness to try things. I mean, you've exposed yourself to a wide variety. Well, they kind of all fall under food and egg in some loose way,
Right.
but still you learned these different trades, and it sounds, if I'm to listen to you, that you pretty enthusiastically learned. You learned on the ranch, you learned from these farmers, you learned in the restaurant, you learned as a chef, you learned supply chain, you drove a truck. Where did that come from? Like, where did that mindset come from where you were curious enough and adventurous enough and courageous enough to go try these things?
Yeah.
Because most people, they're not going to go get in their truck and drive. So I just want to, I want to see where that came from.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question. I've kind of always had that, that adventurism spirit and that idea of, just being able to, like, let's experience that and let's try that. Growing up, my mom exposed me to a lot of things. We were members of the different fine arts series in town. And so I remember going to some amazing jazz concerts when I was 10 and 12, 13 years old, and watching the legends play when they would come through Milwaukee, or, go to the state fair and see the country artists when they came to town. And like, just that, like that exposure to a whole bunch of different things when you're young, and, don't say no to anything as much as you can, and try to see those things. And then when I got older, it was just like, well, that's what I'm going to do. I mean, when I graduated from Marquette, I had a professor that was a big traveler, and he was one of those anthropologists that would go and live in New Guinea, in the part of the map that doesn't show up on the map. And he would, he had that, and he kind of lit that fire in me. And so it's
possible.
Yeah.
So you learned it was possible.
Yeah, right. And so I graduated from Marquette, and I'd spent 3 months in Brazil, and just went down there and didn't know anybody. Was on the flight down there, and I sat next to this young man who was working in a hotel in Indiana on some work share program, and he was on his way back home, and he was going back to Rio, and he gave me his phone number, and he said, like, I want to be a tourist in my own city because I haven't been home in a long time and I miss Rio, so why don't you come with me?
Oh, wow.
So
cool.
He took me around, and we went to all of the, the tourist things. And then I left and kind of went around the rest of the country, but then finished my trip, and I stayed with him and his family at their house. And so, like, I think, it was like, you have some of those really good experiences, and you feel like I can do this again. Yeah. And so I think, and then kind of the professional side of things, the love for food and sharing food, like, that's one of the things I still love to do, is have all the family come over and spend all day cooking and provide this big feast for everybody, and see people enjoy the food that you make and share and create. And it's kind of like, somehow we can do this, or I can do this on my professional side of things, whether it's, helping to create the supply chains to connect regenerative producers to beef markets so that their animals are going to the right place. And it's kind of that, that bounty that we're sharing still, that feeling still comes through in some of that work and those kind of things. And, so it's just always been, that passion to be a part of the food system and see how different producers can do different things and how we can make it all fit together. So,
you hit on another topic that was just brought up on another interview with Dr. Lundgren, where it really smacked me between the eyes, where it was like, food is meant to be shared, not bought and sold.
Yeah.
It's just meant to be shared. Because it does feel so natural. When you make a meal for somebody, either an individual or a crowd, and watching that experience, and of course, when you put all that effort into it, you are watching to see, do they like it?
Yeah, right.
And then all your reward comes if they just smile and say, ooh, that's good. Yeah. And it's like, all right, it was all worth it.
Right.
It was all worth it. But it's like, there's a certain ideal there that I like, that I'm playing with, is like, God, that's so true. It's, as food is meant to be shared. And it's so evident when you're in the middle of that.
Yeah.
So
that community, community piece, right?
Yeah. And of course, in a lot of ways we got away from that,
Oh, sure. When you think of, I remember when I was working for the one gentleman in he was talking about the number of minutes that a meal used to last compared to how many minutes it lasts now, and how a dinner used to be an hour and now dinner is 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And how much time is spent in front of a TV eating dinner instead of at a table. And I'm guilty of that.
And now a phone.
We sit on the couch a lot of nights and watch something and eat and, and gotten away from that. But, it definitely is something that connects all of us. It's the one thing we do every day, right?
Yeah. 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 At least once. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll have to value that and encourage that food sharing and the events that we pull together. It's like, that's got to be a part of it. So
yeah. And that's, a lot of that, for me, when I started, I wanted to learn about farmers that were growing the food, and I wanted to know where it came from. And that's a big part of that component too, right? It's not just, food doesn't come from a grocery store,
right?
It comes from these producers.
Or a box.
Yeah. It's for folks that are, committed and dedicated to this and want to be a part of this. And,
honoring that.
Exactly.
Just honoring that.
Yeah.
Everything that went into getting that food there at that time and prepared. Yeah, we really got away from that. It was like food is just a transaction. That's all it is. Transaction. Whether it's a transaction with our body or a transaction with another person, it's just a transaction.
Right.
So, we can work on that. If you feel that way out there, give us some encouragement, because I think it's something that collectively we can work on together. Another fascinating conversation. Thankfully, there's more. Check out our next episode.